Hello! So today I'm going to be talking about upgrading the lighting on my Ram 2500 Power Wagon. I'm up here on the roof because this is where my journey began with upgrading the lighting, right here on the clearance lights. So I noticed that one of the bulbs was burned out, and when I went to replace the original incandescent bulb, I noticed it had gotten so hot that it had partially melted the socket. And I went ahead and soldered a brand new socket in place, and I thought I'd go ahead and replace all the old incandescent bulbs with these new LED bulbs from Sealight. Now the LED lights should be a bit brighter and run a lot cooler, and I thought all was good until over the course of the next couple of weeks I had 3 more lights go out. So I don't think the LEDs have burned out. I think the problem lies in the connection point. So these LEDs are just using a very thin wire. There's only one wire on either side of the bulb, and I just don't think there's enough area there to make a good connection. Even though I went and cleaned out all the sockets and made sure they were all nice and tight, I just couldn't get these to work reliably. So I went ahead and bought some new LED bulbs. These are from Sarundo Auto, and if you'll notice, the connection points are a lot different. They actually use a printed circuit board style connector. Instead of just having one on each side, there's actually 2 on each side. So there's a lot more surface area here for a better connection. These also fit a lot tighter into the sockets. And so far over the course of the last couple of weeks, I haven't had any issues with these at all. So I think I've solved my problem. So these are nice and bright. They're a lot brighter than the original incandescent bulbs. They run a lot cooler. And they also produce a much more amber tint relative to the sea lights. Those were more of a yellow. As with most vehicles, the reverse lights on this truck don't do a really great job of lighting the path behind me at night. First of all, they're not really aimed very well, and they just don't throw out enough light to pick up any detail in my backup camera. Now, there are a couple of things I had in mind when thinking about upgrading the lights on the back of the truck. First of all, when I have the camper in place, these reverse lights here are going to be blocked. So I wanted to keep open the option of adding supplementary lights underneath the bumper here. Secondly, if I do add supplemental lights down the road, I'm going to want to tie them into the existing reverse lights so that when I put the truck in reverse, all the lights come on at the same time without having to add any additional switches. So therefore, my next consideration is power budget. So I know that the incandescent bulbs that are in the reverse lights now, those consume about 16 watts of power each, or 32 watts total. So that's my total power budget. So when I add supplemental lights, I want to make sure that those lights plus the reverse light bulbs are not consuming 32 watts of power, so that I don't exceed the circuit capabilities of the truck. So I'm looking for LED bulbs to replace the old incandescents, which are going to be brighter than the incandescents, but without exceeding my 32 watt power budget when I add supplemental lights. Okay, so here's what I came up with. These are Oxyland 921 LED bulb replacements. Now, these only draw 7.5 watts of power each, which is less than half the 16 watts of the original incandescent bulbs. Now, they claim to put out 1100 lumens each, but you really have to be careful with marketing claims. I know that the best LEDs on the market only put out about 100 to 150 lumens per watt, so these are probably closer to 750 lumens, I think. But even so, they're still a lot better than the 350 lumen incandescent bulbs that are in there now. And they should throw out a nice bright white light, which will also help with visibility. So I'll also be changing out the original fog light bulbs, and again, power is a consideration. So I'm going to be using off-road lights in conjunction with the existing stock fog lights. So the stock fog lights are going to be aimed right in front of the vehicle, and then the off-road lights are going to be aimed a bit higher with a nice bright flood pattern. So instead of adding a new switch to my dash, I decided to go ahead and wire in the off-road lights into my existing fog lights down here. Now, existing fog lights consume 45 watts of power each, or about 90 watts total. So the idea here is if I can ditch the old halogen bulbs and replace them with some low power LED bulbs, then that'll buy me some margin to allow me to add in the additional off-road lights without causing any electrical issues. I'm going to give Sealight another chance here. These are 9145 replacement LED bulbs. I'm going to use these in replacement of the stock halogens that are in the fog lights now. So these only draw 8 watts of power each, and I assume that means they probably put out somewhere around 800 lumens each. Now that's slightly less than the brand new halogens, which would put out about 1,000 lumens when they're new, but halogens do fade over time, and also these will put out a much wider light, which also helps with visibility. So overall, I'm going to say that these are roughly equivalent to the bulbs that are in there now, but they only draw a fraction of the power. Now these LED bulb replacements surprised me a bit. Despite their low power consumption, they're a lot brighter than I expected. And it doesn't show up very well on camera, but I picked up a lot of detail on my backup camera screen with the new LED lights relative to the old incandescents. However, I will say that both the reverse lights and the fog lights aren't very well focused, and the light's a lot more diffused than it was with the original incandescent bulbs. So that brings me to my next topic. Okay, so let me address the headlights. So I was initially planning to replace the old halogen low beam and high beams with some LED replacement bulbs until I did a bit more research and I changed my mind. And there are a few reasons why. First of all, changing out the bulbs to LEDs is actually illegal according to the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. And the way this works is the manufacturer of the vehicle has to certify their headlight assembly based on Department of Transportation specifications. So if you go and modify that headlight assembly, like changing out the halogens to LEDs or HID bulbs, you've made modifications which are no longer in compliance. There are some really good reasons for that regulation. So the OEM headlight assemblies have reflectors inside which are designed for halogen bulbs that have a filament and a very specific focal length. Now, some of the LED manufacturers do a pretty poor job of mimicking this halogen bulb, and that results in a very poorly aimed beam. And that could reduce your own visibility if it's not aimed properly, or it could also become a problem for oncoming traffic. Also, from the results that I've seen in various tests, a lot of these LED bulbs are either dimmer than stock or are much, much brighter than stock. And again, neither of those situations is really ideal. So you want to be able to see yourself, but you don't want to be blinding other people. Now, if you buy halogen bulb replacements with DOT markings, you're going to be in compliance with the regulations. Now, I have seen LED bulbs with DOT markings as well, but those are actually not in compliance if they're being used as headlights. They are compliant if they're being used as fog lights. That's because the DOT doesn't regulate fog lights, reverse lights, tail lights, things like that, which are considered supplemental and not generally aimed directly at oncoming traffic. Now, there is another option to upgrade to LED lights legally. So there are several manufacturers which have designed complete headlight assemblies which use LED lights, and those have been tested and comply to the U.S. regulations. Unfortunately, the ones that I've seen that are available for this truck are ridiculously expensive. So I'm going to be sticking for the standard halogens for now, and to be honest, the halogens are perfectly fine for everyday driving. If I need additional light off-road, I'm going to be using some dedicated off-road lights. Okay, so to summarize, for a cheap upgrade, swapping out the clearance lights, the reverse lights, and the fog lights to LED bulbs was well worth the effort. As I mentioned before, the reverse lights and the fog lights didn't quite have the same focus that the old incandescent bulbs had, but I think overall I increased my visibility just because the lights are brighter and they're a much wider light. So next I'll be installing some off-road lights. If you want to check that out, I'll be publishing that in the next video. And that's about all I have for today, and as always, thank you for watching.